Okay, so with our first prototype, we're going to call it prototype 1. Choose a location for your file to be stored, and we're going to be making a Windows Forms app. So with prototype 1, we're going to test out whether we can actually draw a ball that bounces around the screen. That's what we're going to be testing out now. So we make a Windows Forms application. It takes its time to create it, and then we're going to code what's going to happen. We're going to code a ball on the screen that moves around and bounces when it hits the edge of the screen. That's what we're going to go for. So what comes up is your form, and then if you right click and view the code, you get to see the code inside of that form. So currently there'll be nothing but a constructor that initializes the form itself, and there's nothing else there. What we're going to do is declare graphics, and I'm just going to call it graphics as well with a lowercase g. That's going to help me draw onto the form. I'm going to have an x coordinate, let's say 150, a y coordinate, so this x and y will be where the ball is, its ball coordinates, at 100, and a velocity in x and a velocity in y as well. So int vx, so velocity x, so how fast is it travelling in the x direction, let's set that to 1, and a velocity in the y, so how fast is it travelling in the y direction, let's say 2 for that one. So they're kind of the information for my ball to use when it's drawing, so it knows which location to draw it at, and then when it's updating its position, so it knows how much to update it by in the x and in the y. I'm going to make some new subroutines now to help us to do this. In the initialize part in the constructor, so this is going to be called a constructor. I'm going to do this dot paint. So that's going to be referring to this form that we're looking at, and the event at which it paints is going to be calling a particular subroutine. It's going to call the subroutine paint ball. Now that subroutine doesn't exist yet, but we can get Visual Studio to help us. It has a little light bulb and it says generate method. So we'll click on that and it's generated the method. So that gets rid of the red line and it also generates this method for us, which we'll come back to in a second. To make it a little bit nicer to look at, we'll also set something called a double buffer as well. Double buffered equals to true. It makes it slightly less flickery when the ball's moving. Windows Forms isn't the best place to be doing moving objects and kind of programming games or simulations, but double buffering will help make it look a little bit better. Painting the ball, I'm going to get rid of this automatically generated code, and we're just going to refer to the graphics. and the graphics is going to be set equal to this eGraphics. So when the paint method is called, so the paint method will just be the drawing of the form. When that's called, it's also going to call this subroutine down here. So it's going to jump down to here and call the paintball subroutine, passing into it, you know, what is actually being painted. Well, it's the form itself. So this is the graphics for the form. We set it equal to graphics, and then we can kind of draw what we want. We want a ball. So we're going to use a solid brush to help us. Use the suggested name as well. Solid brush equal to new solid brush. So solid brush is going to be like our paintbrush, and it's going to have the same colour for the line on the outside as well as like a fill colour. And for our prototype purposes, we'll start off with the idea of it being blue. I like the idea that blue is kind of a healthy person. We might change the colour system later on. Blue's kind of a healthy person for our simulation. And then when we're actually drawing, we are going to use fill ellipse, and we're going to make it a circle by just having the same height and width. But we could make it an oval by changing the height and the width to being a different thing. For the brush that it needs, well, we've just declared the solid brush, so there's the solid brush, and then it wants a rectangle. We're going to go with the things that we declared earlier, the X position, the Y position, and then a width and a height. And if we do 10 by 10, it'll make us a small little circle. So it's going to use this brush that we declared, so it's a blue brush that is filled. It's a filled colour. It's going to draw it at that location, that X and Y, and the height, the width of it will be 10 and the height of it will be 10 as well. So we'll get a nice little circle appear on the screen. And in fact, if we run it, hopefully, if we run this now, we should see that happen. Try it again. I'm just going to compile it, and any moment now. Builder started. Here it goes. There we are. So we get a nice little blue circle appear on the form. And where does it appear? Well, it appears at whatever location X and Y are, and we suggested that that was 150 and 100. So just to test that out, if we change that location, we should see the blue dot change as well. So if I go 1010, what that's going to do is make the blue dot appear quite close to the top left. The top left on our screens is going to be our 0, 0 position. So it's a bit different to what you've seen in maths. Maths 0, 0 would be normally bottom left. But on the computer, we have 0, 0 being the top left of any sort of screen or form. So there's our little blue dot. Of course, we don't want it to just sit there and just stay put. Not immediately anyway. We want to be able to have it bounce around like on the simulations we saw before. So that's what we're going to do next. So in order to do that, we're going to make another subroutine. We're going to call it move ball, because it's going to move the ball. It's going to be a procedure, so we're not returning anything, so it's void. Move ball. And it doesn't really need any parameters. I'm going to have a new X position. new ball x, and that's going to be the x position plus the velocity in x. And then the same thing for the y. New ball y position, and y is going to change by the velocity in y. This idea of velocity in x and y won't be new to people that are doing physics. If you've done mechanics, that is already. We typically change or try and simplify the world down into simpler forms, and this is one of the ways of doing it. So changing a velocity in a particular direction into two components in this 2D world that we've got going on, in an x component and a y component. So that's no different here. We want to make sure that the ball's position, new ball x, isn't going to go too far left. Now left of the screen is going to be the coordinate 0 in the x form. So if new ball's x is less than 0, it must have collided with the left-hand wall. Or we need to look at the other side of it. Or if the new ball's x coordinate, or if the ball's x coordinate plus its width. Now I've got some bad practice there. I've just had to type out the width as being 10 manually here. So this is something we're going to have to come back to later on. Because if I change the width in one place, I'm going to have to go and change the width everywhere else. I should be using some form of variable for that, but we'll fix that later on. If the x position of the ball, now the x position of the ball will be the top left of the individual shape, so the top left plus its width, if that is greater than the client size, so that's going to be our window dot width, then we must have gone too far to the right hand side of the screen. Our ball must be hitting the right hand side of the screen, and we don't want it to do that. So in those eventualities, well, our velocity x needs to be reversed. So if we've gone too far to the left, so we're maybe subtracting 1 every time, and we're going left, 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 and we go off the screen, we want the ability to have it bounce backwards, so our velocity needs to change to plus 1 instead of minus 1. So if our velocity x was minus 1, minus 1 would give us plus 1. And alternatively, when we got to the right hand side of the screen, we've been adding 1 each time, or whatever number vx is. We want it to then reduce and go the opposite way, so 1 becomes minus 1, so it's now travelling the other way. And then our if statement is needed for the y direction as well. So we can change things up in y, remembering if we do copy and paste like I just did, to change all of the variable names correctly. So yeah, we need to go by a height this time. The height of our ball is still 10. Again, bad practice that we've not created a variable for that. And the same thing for the velocity in y. The velocity in y needs to change direction. If we we need to update our actual X and Y positions after that. So our X position is going to be adding the velocity in X, and our Y position is going to be adding the velocity in Y. And of course the bit before it was to figure out if we needed to reverse the directions we were travelling in terms of X or in terms of Y. And finally we need to do invalidate. And if we just have a quick look at what invalidate does, invalidates the specified region, adds controls to the region, which the area will be repainted. So our invalidate is going to cause the form to be repainted, and when the form is repainted, it's going to call paintball. So we've changed our X and a Y location. We've then forced it to paint the form again. And once the form has been painted, it's going to call paintball subroutine, and it's going to draw our ellipse, our circle, again in our new X and a Y location. So that's the purpose of that. So that's the code for move ball. We need to actually call the moving of the ball to make sure that it will move, and we're going to use a timer. So if you go back onto the form and the toolbox, and if you ever can't find the toolbox, you go into view, it'll be there, and you can see there's a shortcut for it if you want it. Control Alt X. Other times where people can't see anything in the toolbox, well, it's because you've not got the form selected. So make sure you've got the form selected, then the toolbox, and you can find the timer. So we drag the timer on. There shouldn't be anything actually appears here on the form because a timer is not something that you should be able to see. But it does come down here at the bottom to show you that there is a timer. And we want to change some of the properties of the timer. So we click on timer 1, and then if we set its interval down to 10, that means that every 100th of a second it will run this timer. If we had it as 1,000, that would be 1 second, 100th, 10th of a second, sorry, not 100th, a 10th of a second, 100th of a second. So reducing the interval is when this timer will trigger. And I'm also going to set it to being enabled, so it's true. Okay, so those settings are in there. So it's enabled, so it's working, it's timing, and then the interval is every 100th of a second. If we double click on the timer, do I want to double click on it? Give me a second. Yeah, I'm going to double click on the timer, and it will automatically generate some code for us. The timer tick. Now the timer tick will run every one of those 100ths of a second. So every 100th of a second, I want it to move ball. So it's just calling the subroutine we just made. And you should see that that now comes up as 1 reference rather than 0 reference. So every 100th of a second this executes, calls move ball, tests out the new X and the Y position by adding the velocity in X, velocity in Y, making sure it doesn't go beyond the bounds of the form, so not too far to the left or not too far to the right, and if it does, it changes the velocity from going left to right or right to left, and then the same in the Y direction, not going too far up or not going too far down, and thus changing the velocity in the Y direction to be in the opposite. The actual X and Y position then are added to, so the velocity, the direction that we're travelling there, and we invalidate the form, so we cause it to repaint. When the form repaints, so when it repaints, it will call the paintball subroutine, which kind of like picks up a paintbrush, in this case a blue paintbrush or a paintbrush with the colour blue on it, and then creates or fills an ellipsis, which in our case, because our height and the width is exactly the same, it's going to be our circle, and draws it at that location XY with the colour blue with this solid brush. So we cross our fingers, start the compilation and get the form to run, and within a short time we should see the form appear. And the ball moves, and when it hits one of the edges, it reverses direction. Its velocity changes from plus to minus, or minus to plus, and reverses direction. So our first prototype, we've got a little bouncing ball around a form. And it looks beautiful. It's a little flickery on my screen, so imagine with a screen recording on yours as well, it would be even flickier. I remind you that Forms isn't the best place to create moving objects and in interactive simulations and things, but it's what we're going to work with right now. That's our prototype made. Next time we'll make it a bit more object orientated.